Hello, hello everyone. Hey guys. I feel like I sounded like Barry White right there. I was like, hey guys. Sorry, that was a little bit deeper than my Venus traditionally would like to show up on our live events. Hello, everybody. How are you guys doing? I'm just going to start saying hello to you in the chat. And if you are not here to be live in the chat with us, I just want to say hello to you wherever you are, whether it's day, it's night, it's evening. If it's at 3 a.m. and we're hanging out together, I'm just saying hello to you. So beautiful to be here with you guys again. I've done a lot of live streaming this week and it's been really fun. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed it as well and enjoyed, some of the topics that we are talking about. So first and foremost, before we really get into the nitty gritty of what we're going to talk about tonight, which is your seventh house in astrology, we're going to get into that. I want to share a little bit about this house, which will also lead us to talking a little bit about the first house as well. Some of you are very advanced, like you're like, Stormy, listen, the seventh house is old news for me. But some of you may be a little bit newer, or maybe I have a perspective on the seventh house or the planets that are there or points, and you can benefit a little bit of that from that tonight. So hello in the chat to everybody. So make sure you guys hit the like button as well, because it really helps the channel, helps the videos be seen. Of course, it's encouraging to your creator as well, that we're not just hanging out here in the internet and you're like, oh my God, she's crazy, stop talking. Okay, so first and foremost, you guys, we do have coming up this weekend the 7th annual free 2023 forecast event with our friends over at Astrology Hub. So hopefully you guys will sign up. I'll make sure that the link is in the description box underneath this video as soon as the live is done. But hopefully you guys will get signed up. You'll come over, you'll enjoy. It's so awesome. I really do actually enjoy hanging out with Astrology Hub because it gives you so much access to many different astrologers. And if you hang out with me here, I am a big fan of that. I want you guys to know who's out there. How did they practice? What are they talking about? Because astrology, like anything else, it's a language. It is a language, right? It is a language. It is a craft. So I want to be an interpreter of this language for you. But I also want you to find who you can hear interpreting the language, because if you can't understand the language or you don't understand what's being said, how can you breathe that into your bones, into your being, into your DNA and grow with that? Right? So I want you to have access to all of the different astrologers and all the different content that is available. So I really support the mission at Astrology Hub. And of course, we are going to be getting together for free and talking about what's coming up, what's going on, what's available for you in 2023, which I have to say that, for the most part, as I continue to look at the mundane astrology of things, 2022 had a lot going on, but I also think that there's a fair amount of shifting in 2023, 2024 that will take a little bit longer, that I want us to be not braced for. We don't brace. We don't use astrology to hide from what's going on, but we're informed. Right? We're informed of what the energetic pattern is, so that, when the Fed says, oh, we're raising rates again in December 2022, it should all be good by, February, March, April, you understand that energetically that is not the trend. And what does that mean for your life? So we get to be prepared around here with what some of the themes are bringing in. So join us, please join us at the forecast event, and it is free. Right? like that's the other part that I really get excited about. I'm like, oh, is that free? That's fantastic. So anyway, so it's free. I'll make sure that the link is in the chat, which I'm putting in there right now, but I will also make sure that it is in the description box down below this video, so you can get signed up, join. There's probably going to be a mystery astrologer showing up. So I would love to see you guys there. Plus, look at this beautiful picture. Cameron Allen, he's part of the tribe. We've had Cameron over, Gemini Brett. We've had these people into our own school, okay? All right, my beautiful friends. The housekeeping is a little bit out of the way, and I can't wait to see you guys there. So now let's talk about this 7th house in astrology. So if you do not have your astrology chart already, you can head to astro.com, Cafe Astrology, any one of these free resources, and just pull your chart up. If you use Astro Gold, do you like pull your chosen app, whatever you do to get your chart, you're going to want to have that so you can take a full look at what's going on in your first house and in your seventh house for our conversation tonight. Also, if you want a bigger breakdown of what's going on in your chart, you can absolutely order one from me. That is already in the description box down below. Come and see me at stormygrace.com. I'll get you hooked up, get you a report, all of the things, right? Now, when we're talking about the seventh house, it's not just in your natal chart. You have the option for a ton of different charts in a given month. You can do a lunar return chart. You can do that every 28 days. You can pull a solar return chart. You're going to pull that once a year. You can look at your progressed chart. There's so many charts you can look at. So I just want you to know, as we're talking about the concepts of the seventh house tonight, translate that to wherever you are in your own particular practice. And your skill level, and look at the themes that are represented by that. But for tonight, we're going to focus a little bit more into the natal chart so that you can grab that and start using it pretty immediately here, okay? All right, so first and foremost, when we are looking at the chart, what is the seventh house all about in the first place? So we've got the ascendant that is immediately to the left of the chart when you look at it, the sign that is resonating there. And then we've got the descendant, or the seventh house, that is immediately to the right of the chart. And we're talking about what's immediately to the right of your chart. What's the sign that is on the cusp of that house? Because the seventh house is about conscious, chosen, one-on-one relationships, right? Like, I know I am agreeing to hang out with you for some reason. You advance my cause in some way, and I advance yours as well. It's literally the understanding in that seventh house that I can only go so far on my own. There has to be a partnership and interdependence that takes me and you to the next place that we want to go. Okay. So this is going to talk about, yes, your partnerships, all kinds of partnerships, business partnerships, romantic partnerships. The partnership I also include in there is the partnership with you and you, the partnership with whatever you, with you and whatever you call a higher power, right? Like, what is your connection with the universe? Let's look at what's going on in your seventh house. But this is also the place of other partnerships, right? Your open enemies live in the seventh house. And by open enemies, I mean, you know that this is an adversarial relationship. You know that such and such at work doesn't care for you. You don't care for them. Everybody knows about it. Or maybe it's that you are going through a court case or you're going through a divorce. You know the person on the other end of the disagreement, okay? That's what's meant by open enemies. Now, the enemies who are your haters and you don't know them, they live in the 12th house. But we're not talking about that tonight. Tonight, we're talking about the ones you know don't like you, right? Visual side eye. Okay, so we will also see that in the seventh house. So when you're thinking about the seventh house, I want you to be thinking about, how do I cooperate with people? What is my relationships? How do I make agreements with people? How do I function in a partnership lens? Okay, so that's first thing to note over there. Now, the other thing about the seventh house that I want you to realize and kind of get calibrated to is that, yes, these are the kinds of relationships and how you'll function in relationships, but it's also qualities, like you're pulling in people whose qualities act as a mirror to you, about you. Okay, so their qualities, their tendencies, their whatever are going to hold up a mirror to you, where you have to stop pointing the finger there and let two fingers point back at you, right? Like, you spot it probably because you got it, right? It's a place where we really come to having to, we have to navigate, what are my qualities that show up that help me form and create unity in my partnerships, or that I am in a failure to create a true partnership here in this particular situation or this particular relationship. But whether you are meeting that with some success or you've got some growth to grow there, it really is about, you can't learn these lessons by yourself. You have to have the connection and cooperation of this relationship in order to move forward and grow. You were just never going to learn it by yourself. That's really what the seventh house like shines that mirror for us. So partnerships, agreements, I've got to connect and collaborate with you, even if it's in conflict because we're in an adversarial relationship. Whatever it is, I need you through the lens of my seventh house to help me grow more fully into me and into the understanding of unity and partnership, okay? Now, the other thing is that when we are looking at the seventh house, because it's so much about the us, it's the we version of the chart, right? Like, how are we relating? We also need to flash to the ascendant, which is the first house, and that's the me house, right? My identity lives here, what I believe about myself, how I dress myself, how I present myself, all of these things. And these are a lot of my own qualities. And I like typically these qualities about myself. So I will seek out these qualities in other people, but I might need to be developing some of the opposite of those qualities, which is why I call in people into my seventh house, right? Because if I'm all I develop into, right? Like all of my I got to call somebody else in to help me sharpen my tools, to help me sharpen my understanding and grow, to not just be so locked in the me, to see how I function in a we. Now, the other part about the first house looking across to the seventh house is I can take my qualities that I love and I can project them into the we. And I'm like, yes, I love us because of this. But I can also project the qualities that I'm struggling with. And they're my struggles, my growth points into our relationship. And then I will blame you for them. I'm like, you need to get better. And it's really me who is being presented with that particular work, but the relationship house helps me see it in my individual house, because my holdbacks will not let me create partnership. They will be the same qualities I use that create disunity in my relationships instead of unity. Okay, so again, it acts as that really nice kind of mirror to echo back to us. Okay, now, when we're looking at the chart and we're considering what's going on in your seventh house, first of all, you need to know the sign that is on the cusp. Who's sitting there? When you look directly to the right of your chart, which sign is sitting there? Because that's the sign. Those are the characteristics of how you're going to do relationships. And that is like the evolutionary scale of where you're going to learn in your relationships, right? You know, if you've got let's say you've got Aries on your descendant, you're going to pull in relationships that have an influence. Those Aries energies are going to have influence on the relationships around you. You're going to pull in relationships into your life that maybe are a bit more fiery, because it means you've got a Libra descendant, or a Libra ascendant, excuse me. So you may pull in relationships where you're learning a little bit more about being independent so that you can develop interdependence, right? These can be qualities that show up for you there. If you've got Gemini in the seventh house, you know, what are the qualities and characteristics of Gemini? They talk a lot. Listen, it's a communication sign. So in whatever way the talking is done, because, you know, a Gemini will talk with their hands, they will talk with their mouth, they will talk with these facial features, right? And it's a quick moving kind of energy. It's in the details of things energy, right? So you might be detail oriented as well in the people and the partnerships that you call in, but what Gemini energy doesn't always love to do is stick around forever, right? Gemini is like, oh, that was cool. So you may struggle with longer term commitment in your relationships. This may be a place of development, right? Or the people who come into your life, that could be something that they mirror to you, and you're getting to learn a little bit about that. So there's the full evolutionary scale of what you can experience, but you can look to the sign and then any planets that will show up coming into your 8th house for the characteristics that you are going to learn about. Now, I want to talk about the planets being in your 7th house as well, to just give you like a little snippet preview of what you could be expecting there. But I want to address first the empty house. And this is common. Okay. So you look over to the right of your chart and you see your 7th house doesn't have any planets in it. Okay. It doesn't mean, we call it an empty house, but it actually doesn't mean that the planet is, that the house is empty. It means a planet wasn't traveling through there at the time. But the sign that is ruling that descending energy is still going to have rulership and have impact into that 7th house. So prime example for me, I've got Pisces at my descendant. Girl, I'm delusional. Listen, I have been married to people who don't even know that I know them. Like, I mean, it's better. Like, I'm married to a real person now, but it was a struggle. But anyways, so I don't have any planets in my 7th house, but Pisces rules my descendant. So both Jupiter and Neptune are going to be energies that I need to pay attention to, because they will also have influence as things are happening. But I need to pay attention to my Piscean characteristics as well. I need to pay attention to what Neptune is doing. And so it also means that for me, right, when Neptune does something, is in transit, or my Neptune gets stimulated, what would happen for me is, I'm telling you, my Neptune would get some kind of stimulation, you guys, and I would be in love. I would be in love, right? And it was very fantasy, right? It was like I wanted that soulmate kind of love. And it's like, I remember distinctly, I'm on a mini tangent. I'm sorry. I'm going to tell you this story. I remember there was a nice little Neptune activation in my chart. And this guy, he presented himself, he just ethered himself right on in here. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, we are compatible. And I thought we were compatible, right? Just looking through my little Neptunian lens, because we both ate cookies for breakfast. Right? This was where I was at on my evolutionary scale, right? That I was like, oh my God, we must be soulmates. Like, we both eat cookies for breakfast. What I never considered is that perhaps we just both have jacked up nutritional lives. And that it didn't end up working out, because there was no sustainability in the fantasy I was telling myself about that. Right. And what that person ended up wanting from me, because I entered into it in a delusion, right? I entered into it waiting for my soulmate to complete me. So that didn't work out, probably for the best, right? Right. So you have to watch these qualities that are over there, is all I'm saying. So if you have an empty house, it's not empty. There's just not a planet there, but it does still have influence. Okay. So that's that. So let's talk about these planets and identify for me, in the comment section down below, in the chat, wherever we're connecting, if you have a planet or what that ruling emphasis has been in your particular chart. Okay. So let's just start. We're going to start actually with the nodes. Okay. And these are not planets, they're points, but I want to address them because we've had so much nodal conversation going on this year. So let's start with that. Okay. So if you have the north node in your 7th house, south node in your 1st house, but let's focus on the 7th house. Okay. So you've got this north node in your 7th house. It's interesting. That's a direction that you're growing. You've got some destiny partnerships that you need to call into your life, that you will, and they are really a part of you fulfilling the mission, of that North Node, of going towards your destiny, right? And you have to learn. There will be a lot of learning, and it maybe is not the most easy thing as you're moving towards that North Node, right? And you may have to practice with that North Node there in the 7th house, realizing that you have to cooperate, right? Remember, moving towards that North Node is sometimes a little bit harder. It can feel like a little bit more of a challenge. Where you'll have ease is at your South Node, right? And your South Node is like, I'm independent. I'm good. I'm handling my own self. I'm handling my own space. And that can be harder for that North Node to understand that it's like, I have to surrender some of that me, and allow there to be a we. And this isn't always just in the sense of like, my material things. This can be around thought processes that you have where you're having to make space for a relationship to shape you into the we, right? So just thinking about that, okay? But let's switch that real quick. Let's say you've got the South Node in the 7th house, North Node in your 1st house, okay? So with this South Node in the 7th house, you have to be mindful that you have a voice. You have a voice in these relationships of yours as well. You have a voice in the relationship. You have a voice and you have a part in the conflict in your life, right? Like you have a part in it, even if it's just that you continue to participate, give it energy, give it whatever, right? You've got to get away from what everybody else thinks. What do you think? Because your North Node work is on the other side, right? It's going to me, but you're really comfortable in the we. And it's like, no, we'll just do it whatever you like, right? And it can also make you with the South Node in your 7th house, depending on the sign, of course, but you can be very polite, whether you want to be or you don't want to be. Like you could flat out not like somebody and you have overlearned the skill of diplomacy. So you may be more polite than is always necessary, right? So these can be some of the lessons that you are learning with that particular placement. Now, remember, you guys, okay, I have to say this, cosmic results may vary depending on your particular chart. So just keep that in mind. We're just doing a little general exploration here, okay? All right, so let's talk about the sun. We'll move in that direction. So what happens when you have the sun in your 7th house? Well, we've got just bright, shining. So it's really important where the sun is at. We want to shine. We want to be seen. There is a piece of us that absolutely needs to develop here. So when you've got the sun in your 7th house, first of all, it's important. Relationships are important. This is a part of the theming is not a word. It's a part of the themes of your life, okay? When I misspell things or I misspeak, my Virgo rising literally wants to die. I'm not kidding. Okay. However, what you want to remember is that the 7th house is just the 7th house. And depending on the sun sign that is in that 7th house, you again have to be mindful of not creating codependence, creating interdependence, right? Like you're not going to shine more with your sun in the 7th house by just people pleasing. It has to be interdependence. It has to be learning about true partnership in what you're learning, but those will be a big part of your theme, okay? All right, the moon. We get the moon in the 7th house, and we are going to bring a sense of nurturing to our relationships. There's a sense of intuition, security. All these things are attached here, but also with the moon in your 7th house, as other people are moving and grooving and you're navigating through relationships, another person's emotional reaction or another person's behavior has the potential to actually be confusing to you. Right? Because your emotions are trying to tap into a partnership. And what is the one thing we cannot control besides that, like everything, is other people. They are the most complicated things that have ever walked into our lives. They are the most beautiful, but they are the most complicated. So as things are happening, what you may look for is balance. You may look for peace. You may look for diplomacy. You certainly want like harmony in your emotions, your emotional life. You want harmony in your relationships, right? You'll look for that. You'll seek that from an emotional place. You'll make decisions that bring that in. Where this can sometimes get complicated, everywhere is depending on the sign that is ruling your moon and in that seventh house. You can make decisions from an emotional place in your relationships that can be beneficial or can really be hurtful, but they would come from a very emotional place. Okay. All right. Mercury in your seventh house, communication obviously is going to be pretty important. And it may be important to you that you feel like you thrive and you literally need relationships where you can communicate, right? Like you need somebody who's going to be stimulating with you. You're going to call that into your life, who wants to talk about the nitty gritty, who wants to have these conversations about, oh, guess what I saw here? Or you need that intellectual stimulation that comes with Mercury being in a seventh house space. Okay. So whether that is, you've got the planet Mercury, well, it will just depend on the sign that's in, how exactly you'd like to receive that particular communication. But, people that have Mercury in the seventh house as well can be really good negotiators, right? You may have strong negotiation skills. This is fantastic if you're an attorney. This is fantastic if you're in a relationship. You may like a good debate, right? In your relationship, let's say you've got Mercury and Aries in your seventh house. If the conversation doesn't get spicy sometimes, which I am not talking abuse, I'm not talking about any of the things, okay? Don't hear what I'm not saying. But if there's not some spicy debate that pops off sometimes, that Aries energy is not going to enjoy that, right? So you need to kind of understand the sign that's over there as well. Let's talk about having Venus in the seventh house, which is a natural rulership space for Venus anyways. But Venus here, Venus in your seventh house, this is a funny placement because Venus in an outward way is attracting in, right? So it can be very charming. You could just have people come into your life. They just are attracted in, and they can be, right? Like whatever your aesthetic is that you find attractive. In the seventh house, when Venus is here, it's more about the vibe. And you yourself look magnetically charming. There is something about your vibration that is just charming. You may be well received in relationships because there's this charm. One of the things that I always run into with people who have Venus in the seventh house, whether it's retrograde or not, doesn't matter, right? Venus is just boop, 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 boop. I'm cute. I'm attractive. I'm harmonious. There's a beauty about me, right? The flashers are going off, but what can happen with Venus in your seventh house is you're telling your partner something and you're quite serious about it. And they're just so charmed by what you're saying, right? This is a real interesting placement to have when you've got Venus here in this seventh house. Now, you may also prefer to just have relationships with Venus here because it brings you a sense of beauty, fullness, and harmony. And Venus is a relationship sign. You may also call into your life relationships that are financially beneficial or resource beneficial to you, help you up your value understanding, things like that, right? To the other side, let's see what happens when you have Mars in your seventh house. So first of all, Mars in the seventh house is still Mars. So you may be more willing, or your partners that you call in may be more willing to have conflict. Conflict doesn't always equal violence. Let me be clear about that, right? Mars in the seventh house, depending on where you are in your level of advancement, it may mean that something's going on or there's a disturbance in the relationship force and you call it out and you're like, hey, what is this? Right? And what a great way to just put that elephant in the middle of the room on the spot, and you and your partner can work on whatever is there, right? but it would be more, it comes a little bit more from the perspective when Mars is in the seventh house of this is making me uncomfortable, so we need to sort it out. So if you've got Mars in the seventh house, let me know what your experience with that is. But it's certainly coming from a place of, I'm willing to play nice and I'm willing to get things done and be a part of this and be vigorous in this relationship, but something is not sitting right with me. So I'm going to call it what it is. And I'm unafraid to do so usually. Okay. Jupiter. Get Jupiter in that seventh house, or it is ruled by a Jupiterian sign, whether that be Pisces or Sagittarius. Okay. But Jupiter here in your seventh house is actually an opportunity to have strong partnerships, to go far, to expand in and with partnerships, right? It can actually be a great place. You may have a lot of wisdom naturally around what makes partnerships work. You may have a lot of beliefs. You may have practices that celebrate relationships, whatever that relationship dynamic happens to be, but partnership, commitment, things like that. Okay. But the other things to think about when Jupiter's in the seventh house is that you really do care if things are fair, right? Is this fair? Is there equality? Is there justice here? Okay. So those would be themes that would show up in your life, having Jupiter or a Jupiter ruled sign happening here in the seventh house. And I already told you my seventh house ruled by Pisces, very Neptunian, but also I care a lot about, is this fair? Is this just? Is there equity? I care about those things in my relationships a lot. Okay. All right, let's talk about Saturn in that seventh house. Now, people sometimes will get really afraid, and I think that is a misunderstanding and misrepresentation from plenty of resources, that Saturn in the seventh house means you can't have partnerships, and that is the furthest from the truth. But Saturn in your seventh house may mean that, you have to put in a fair amount of effort with the relationships in your life. It can also mean that you crave more long-term, steady, in it for the long haul kind of relationships in your life, where somebody that's got Gemini at that descendant, right? They might be like, yep, no, I'm here for a good time, not a long time. Saturn is like, I'm here for a long time. I don't really care about the good time. You know what I mean? So it can be, and those are things that we can take them to mean really negative things, but long-term partnerships, steady success, these kinds of things will be important to you. It can also mean that you pull partners into your life who are maybe a little bit older, or they're more mature, they're more stable, they're more in their mastery of things in their life, and you can pull that in. And remember, that's just a mirror. It's just a mirror holding up so that you can develop in that way. Now, the one thing I will say about Saturn, and especially, I'm going to just say Saturn, but especially if you have Capricorn at that descendant, I'm going to remind you, you can really easily get caught up in what everybody else thinks. Right? That Saturnian energy can get caught up in what do people think. And then I'm showing up, trying to keep up with the Joneses in whatever way that shows up for you. But it's not about your standard. It's not about your commitment to long-term things. It's about, I'm doing this because society says, or my parents say, or what would people think if I didn't do this? Right? So remember, you live by what's right in your spirit, not necessarily what's right in someone else's. Okay. And so you may do a lot of learning around that. Okay. Now let's look at the other Saturnian, or the other, it's not Saturnian. Let's just look at Uranus. Let's look at Uranus. Okay. So Uranus in the seventh house, or let's say you've got Aquarius on that descendant. This is quite the opposite. You may actually find yourself calling in relationships with people who are younger than you, right? You may like that. You're like, ooh, I want I want somebody in my life who's fun. I need that youth. I need that freedom from all that Saturn, from all that age, from all that responsibility, which youth and irresponsibility are not synonymous in this particular case. But you may want a younger dynamic in your seventh house. You may also be a person who is more willing to even consider engaging some kind of serious partnership with someone if it's innovative, if it's independent, it's different, it's not traditional, right? You may like those things, but you may also be a person who calls partnerships into your life through slow, steady friendships, right? Like, I was friends with this person for 100 years. We went to all the raves. We did all the things. I never once thought about dating that person ever. And Tuesday came and boom, they were. It's very Uranian. So you may find that happening there. Okay. But I will say, if you have Uranus in that seventh house, or you've got Aquarius, one of the things to be mindful of is how independent and how detached that sign can be, which is the nature of that energy. So you also want to make sure that you have partners in your life where you understand their moon sign. You need to understand how to engage that person so that you're not so detached, or you're not just showing up as you are, and they feel alone, right? They feel left alone. Okay, so just something to consider. All right, let's talk about Neptune in the seventh house. I gave you guys my little sneak peek into what it was like for me. But Neptune in your seventh house, you really do flat out. I'm going to tell you, the expectation, the inspiration, the caught up in the vibe, caught up in the moment could be the things that get you the love story, the fantasy of it all, the intergalactic and interworld connections can really get your attention. Now, while that can get your attention, it can also be it can be in that Piscean energy, right? Or that Neptunian energy, excuse me, where you are also working out relationships that have come between lifetimes, right? You're in this lifetime working out a love tie or a relationship bond that extends between worlds in some ways. So I do find truly with people who have Neptune in this house, there is a soul cutting or a cord cutting or a releasing or a forgiveness or a grieving or a transition of even relationships they never actually got into in this lifetime. Okay. And if that's too much on the woo for you, that's just fine. But I will tell you, if you run into a relationship that you're like, I just can't seem to shed it, look into, it's not just the practical in the material world. Is this something else that's happening there? Now, the other thing that can happen just here in the real world is we have unreal expectations, beliefs, ideas, stories we tell ourselves about commitment, about other people, about what it's supposed to look like. It doesn't feel good anymore, so this must be broken. These are stories we can tell ourselves with Neptune in that particular position. So we have a lot of learning about the sustainability, okay? Pluto. You get Pluto into that seventh house, and it's interesting because Pluto is where we're transforming over and over and over again in our relationships, in your relationship life. It's not always easy. It's not always pleasant. It's not always hard. But what it is deep. There is the phoenixing in this portion of your chart and in your life. It's like you die off in one form in relationships and you live in another, right? Now, that doesn't mean you can't be in a long-term, successful, happy, loving relationship. It absolutely doesn't mean that at all. But what it means is that in your particular relationship, you may, as a person, die off in your relationship and be born with something else, right? I'd be born a different way. I've seen relationships where it's, we're in the exact same relationship, and what happened is our partner was had an injury, or they were in an accident, and they died off in the way the relationship used to be, and they're showing up differently now, and we come to a transformative place within our relationship dynamic. So whatever the dying off principle means for you with Pluto here, there's deep bonding and deep connection that happens for you in your relationship life. So you'll know that it's pretty important, right? These will be important things. There's a lot of security that is connected to what's going on in your seventh house as well. And I saw somebody ask, I'm going to answer these other questions I see here in just a second, but I did see somebody ask about Chiron. And so I don't play a ton in the asteroid, but I do follow Chiron. So when you are looking at Chiron, because it is known as the wound, but it's also the greatest healer that we have. It's the place where you can boost people up. But, let it be known, when somebody pokes onto your Chiron, it hurts. It hurts. It absolutely gets your attention, right? And it usually comes from, just like Chiron did, it comes from early on in our lives. What we know about relationships, we've seen early in our lives. Chiron's first interaction with the world was a rejection in his infancy, in his childhood, from the parents, from the people who are supposed to be the safest, right? So you may have some characteristics of the sign, behaviors, actions, attitudes, beliefs that got structured for you early on, right? And you're learning to heal them. You're learning to challenge what you learned. It's like the uncover, discover, and discard that's happening for you around that Chironic energy in your seventh house. Did you watch your parents have a challenging relationship, or, did you watch your parents or people around you have a challenging relationship, but you really saw that they were unhappy and did nothing to do the work to bridge the gap and to change that relationship into a different dynamic? Was there painful custody battles going on? What is it for you? And now you are going to do it different. You have the doorway open to do it different, to heal the wound, or to help heal the wound in another person. Because remember, in the seventh house, we're also attracting in our partners, our mirrors. So you may have a partner who comes to you and you had the best upbringing ever, right? And they didn't. And by teaching them what you know or what you saw, you heal them and it heals you, or vice versa, right? But either way, there's wound healing going on around that particular placement, okay? So I did see one more question. I want to go back up here and want to answer it, and we're going to get out of here. So what aspects of the seventh house carry over when Libra is in the third house natally? I'm not exactly sure that I understand your question per se, but are you just saying because seventh house and natural Libra kind of qualities? Because Libra, no matter where it's at, seventh house, third house, 10th house, Libra, again, realizes at an evolutionary level, it can only go so far on its own. Like, you run out of enough you where this is at, and you've got to partner in some way to go forward. Now, the difference between the house is that this is your department of life that planet or that energy is going to focus on. So it is like, I've got this, and it's going to be in my relationship zones, which could be me and God, or whatever you call God, me and my partners, me and my sexual relations, or me and the court. Right? But Libra is simply about the pure understanding that I cannot go further on my own. I have to partner in order to go further faster. Okay, so you might see some of that in your third house, where you're like, I I don't like just learning online by myself. I like having the teacher there with me, even if it's on Zoom, right? Or my students don't learn well from me. Just, like there needs to be that relational component available to how you learn and how you do things. So you guys, I hope this gave you a little something to think about, something you can grab your charts right away and start going, oh, okay, here's what I've got. Here's the patterns I've seen of myself in the past, right? Because I have so many more Pisces, Neptune energy in the seventh house stories I could share with you guys. I am telling you, I have absolutely been married to people who do not know me. And I really believe it's going to work out. So anyways, I hope this is useful for you guys. I hope to see you guys coming up on the 10th, 3 p.m. Pacific time at the free forecast event with our friends over at Astrology Hub. The link is going to be in the description box down below. So go over, sign up. It's free. I look forward to seeing you there. You've got 15 different astrologers that are going to talk to you about 2023. They're giving away readings. I mean, it's like a good time. It's a good time. So I love you guys so much. And I look forward to seeing you in our next time together.